So, we will pick up where we left off last week, the rising and falling of some things. And I just love this picture of Jesus sitting in the Mount of Olives looking over Jerusalem. Someday we'll be able to walk with him on the Mount of Olives again. In fact, the Bible prophesies that when Jesus comes back, he's going to touch down on the Mount of Olives. And there's going to be an earthquake, I guess, that will cause literally for the ground to rise up and form a throne room, if you will. And he will rule the earth for 1,000 years, the millennium then. But that's not for tonight. Tonight we're going to pick back up and talk about the rising and falling of some things. And we looked at Luke 2:34, kind of took a Christmas twist to it. When Jesus was blessed at the temple and was presented according to the law, that Simeon blessed him and said to Mary his mother, "Behold, this child is set for the fall and rising again of many in Israel, and for a sign which shall be spoken against." I can't imagine what Mary must have felt when she heard those words and wouldn't have any point of reference to understand what they meant, but it doesn't sound very good. And I'm not going to cover all the ground that we did before, but here's where we ended up last week, talking about the rising surveillance threat. We've talked about a lot of things with reference to that. China's social score, and it's in America now on a high level with the bankers and the big dogs who have to borrow large amounts of money. And it's all about the social justice here, whereas in China, it's all about control. Just do what you're told. If you violate what you're told, your social score will go down. And so we're not going to cover all that territory again. But the rising surveillance threat and the rising and falling, this is all happening together. It's all kind of the same thing, but this is just a way to conceptualize it. The battle is for our thoughts, right? That's where the battle's won or lost. And what we have going on is a battle for the thinking of people. And that's the reason why ultimately, we talked about that last week, they're going to implant chips in our minds, in our brain, to try to control our thinking. So in Psalm 64, we have a very interesting psalm. Let's just read it and see if we can plug into it. "Hear my voice, O God, in my prayer. Preserve my life from fear of the enemy." That really nails where we are. Things make us afraid that are going on around us, and we wonder, how's it going to turn out? And so David prays for his life to be preserved from the fear of the enemy. "Hide me from the secret counsel of the wicked." In other words, the planning that they're doing, the evil that they're planning, I can't know it, so protect me from it. "From the insurrection of the workers of iniquity, who whet their tongue like a sword, and bend their bows to shoot their arrows, even bitter words, that they may shoot in secret at the perfect. Suddenly do they shoot at him and fear not." So you kind of get an idea here. He's the king of Israel, and there are enemies out there who are taking pot shots at him where he can't even hear it. They're saying things and plotting things against him. In verse 5, "They encourage themselves in an evil matter. They commune of laying snares privily. They say, who shall see them?" This makes me think of the White House. So at every point when bad news comes up, like now they've got this thing of the worst inflation ever in America, I guess. And so they're plotting. They're in the basement of the White House, so to speak, How can we spin this? They called the press in last week, and they said, listen, you got to help us out with this. So there's this plotting going on by the evil and the wicked. And they say there in verse 5, who shall see them? Now, this reminds me of them because they think, well, if we say it and the press re-says it, everybody's going to believe it. It becomes the truth. The old saying used to be, it's not a lie if you really believe it. This is their mentality. Verse 5, who shall see them? They seek out iniquities. They accomplish a diligent search, both the inward thought of every one of them and the deep and the heart in deep. But God shall shoot at them with an arrow. Suddenly shall they be wounded. So they shall make their own tongue to fall upon themselves. All that see them shall flee away. And all men shall fear and shall declare the work of God. For they shall wisely consider of his doing. The righteous shall be glad in the Lord and shall trust in him. And all the upright in heart shall glory. So you've got this transition from the wicked who are plotting wickedly in the background, and they're going to launch their attacks. But David ends up on a statement of faith, and he very often does that in the Psalms. He says, in the end, they're going to lose. That's where we are today. We've got the great reset going on, the plotting going on. Are they going to win? Well, it looks like it if you don't read your Bible. But if you read your Bible, they can't win. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4, Paul nails this as well. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations, and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringeth into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. So again, while that's not the main thing Paul's thinking about, there's these wicked imaginations, and there's these high places that need to be brought down. And so we need to move in the spiritual realm because our battle is not carnal. It's not physical. We're not going to win there. It's all well and good to elect the right presidents and put the right judges in there and do all that we can do in our democracy. And I believe we have that responsibility because we have that. But that's not where our victory is going to come from ultimately. It's going to come from the Lord. So don't put your trust in horses, as the psalmist said, in the day of battle. So now we transition to begin to talk about the fall of our freedoms. And as I said, the surveillance as it's growing in the world is tied to our freedoms. So these are kind of the same thing, but this is just a way to conceptualize it. So back at 9/11, most of us didn't realize it. We thought, why terrorism? We have to do these things. And so President Bush set up these secret courts, and they're able to do things. They're able to apprehend somebody as they come in the country, and they're never seen from again. All they have to do is say, terrorism. I wonder how much that's been abused. If you think back over the last years, you probably have heard about an individual or two who this very thing has happened to. And I don't know how it turned out. These things are not public. That's not right. I don't care what it is, whether it's terrorism or child pornography or what it is. Our Constitution says what it says, and those are the rights of people who live in this country. And we let Bush and the rest of them take those rights, begin because of 9/11, to take those rights away. And we didn't think much about it. Yeah, terrorism, we want them to protect us, but it's not turning out good for us now. SARS coronavirus 2. What we're experiencing now, I have labeled the real long-haul COVID. So you know what long-haul COVID is. Now, Judy still hasn't gotten her sense of taste and smell back. And it was a year ago. It was just a year ago. This is our anniversary. We were celebrating COVID-19. Judy and I both had it, and it ruined our Christmas. And I've had natural immunity ever since, and I've thrown it in my doctor's face. But that's for another time. So, but the real long-haul COVID, the real implications of COVID are the losses of our freedoms. And they are on an order of magnitude worse because of SARS coronavirus than what we had before. They were slow before, but it's picked up. Wow. And Australia, New Zealand, I'm going to play with you. Let's play for a while. I'm going to play for you a video clip or two they'll be a little bit hard to kind of understand, but maybe I can give you some perspective as we go through it. So here's the Prime Minister of New Zealand. And she's being asked a couple of questions. One of the questions is, are you afraid this is creating a two-tiered society, the vaccinated and the unvaccinated? Her response is shocking.
Basically, see, this is going to be like, well, it's almost like, we're probably going to see it like this, two different classes of people. If you're vaccinated or if you're unvaccinated, you have all these rights. If you are vaccinated...
That is what it is, so, yep.
Can you describe the people previously when we got to the end? Not that you have to do it, I guess, when we still like we could maintain elimination across the whole country. I guess that has now changed because...
I think it was less because necessarily of the elimination determining that, and more because we, of course, maintained, and actually we have managed very high vaccination rates generally without the use of certificates. But actually what it's become clear to me is that they're not just a tool to drive up vaccines, they're a tool for confidence. People who have been vaccinated will want to know that they're around other vaccinated people. They want to know that they're in a safe environment. It is a way that we can give confidence to those who are going back into hospitality or events. And so that is something that I think we should offer to people who have been vaccinated, that confidence that we're doing everything we can to keep them safe and that they can come back out and start enjoying those things safely.
I don't know if you caught that, but she said emphatically, yes, we are creating a two-tier society. That is exactly what the Germans did. And the second thing is, why have the passports? This is why. Because we want one tier to feel safe and secure. Friends, think about the implications of that. The others don't have the right to feel safe and secure. We're not concerned about their rights or how they feel. It is a terrifying statement. If you keep on looking, you might find the 400,000 jobs that Australia has lost, or maybe you've heard about Howard Springs. And I remember the first time I heard about Howard Springs. It's built to hold people in quarantine, and it holds 2,000 people. And as soon as I heard it, I thought, wow, is this how this went when they started building concentration camps? Now, I want you to hear the testimony of a young lady who got to spend 14 days there on a vacation.
It's horrible. It's a horrible feeling. You feel like you're in prison. You feel like you've done something wrong. It's inhumane what they're doing. Like you are so small. They just overpower you, and you're literally nothing. It's like you do what we say, or you're in trouble. We'll lock you up for longer. They were even threatening me that if I was to do this again, we will extend your time in here.
Hello and welcome to Unheard. I'm Freddie Sayers. Australia.
So the audio on that's so bad, I apologize. I couldn't find the original of these, so I had to rip them off from somebody else, so the audio is just not good. What's going on here is this girl had been around somebody who had COVID. And so this person then says everybody they were around. So she gets a call. Were you around so-and-so? Do you know so-and-so? Yeah. So they come to give her a test. And she lies to them, and that got her in trouble ultimately. But when she said, no, I haven't been tested, and so she said, they said they will send somebody to test her. Instead of sending somebody to test her, they send police officers to take her to this compound that they've built for people that are in question whether they got COVID. And she didn't have any choice in the matter. She's like arrested and taken, and she has to stay at this compound for 14 days to get past the quarantine period for COVID-19. And she's told that if you do it again, it won't just be 14 days. Now, this is in Australia, New Zealand. They've built a concentration camp. Who would have thought that even a year ago? We all wondered if that wasn't what was coming, but now it's there. And the Prime Minister of Canada just came out and addressed not too long ago. He said, look, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. When a politician tells us they're not doing something, what does that usually mean? They're going to be doing it eventually. So the two-tiered society, this is huge. In her thinking, when she's asked the question, aren't you afraid you're developing a two-tiered society, vaccinated and unvaccinated? Or the way I'd say it is unvaccinated and vaccinated. Anyway, she said, that's exactly what we're doing. That's what we want to do. That's where we want to go. And she said the reason is because the vaccinated have a right to feel safe. Now, I want to ask you a simple question. If you get the vaccination, don't you have an expectation that you're safe because you got the vaccination? Okay? But things are so muddled and messed up from the beginning, they've been telling us. Even if you get the vaccine, you can still spread it to other people. Okay, how does that work?
And some die. They take it a step further.
Yeah, some die, and I don't even know how to sort all this out. It's insane what they're saying. You should get the vaccine so you'll be safe, but if you get the vaccine, you're going to have to wear a mask and keep yourself separate because you're not safe. It's insanity. Whatever the truth is, you can't talk out of both sides of your mouth. I don't think. So we all know about what New York City did. This is unbelievable. They halted surgeries, elective surgeries, at 30 hospitals. I have a podcast I listen to, a survivalist podcast. And he was in Washington State. And things got so bad there that they moved out. But while he was in Washington State last year, he was supposed to have a colonoscopy done, but because of COVID, they couldn't do that. When they finally came out of it enough to be able to do the colonoscopy, about a year ago, he already had cancer. And he's had to go through having surgery and a colostomy and all the things that go with that because they wouldn't do that elective procedure back a year ago. And it didn't make any difference whether he'd been vaccinated or not, they weren't going to do it. And they tell me that that's happened all across the country, probably all across the world. So I'm wondering, when is there going to be some lawsuits against the government? Oh, you can't sue the government. And thank you, Mr. Trump, you can't sue the big pharma. This is the biggest ding I put on Trump. He was in such a rush to get an answer out there. He was going to show the world, and he had the right motive. He wanted to save lives. We're going to, as a business leader, we're going to get this thing out there. So they pushed it until they had a vaccine. And he told them, if you build it, every vaccine you can build, we will pay for. And you can't be sued. That was an awful decision. Based on good motives, it was an awful decision on so many different levels. There ought to be some lawsuits because there are people who are already dead because they weren't able to have the elective surgeries that they needed to have. That's on a Mengele level of bad. In October, New York's outgoing Democratic Mayor de Blasio issued an order mandating the New York City Police Department and all of the city workers receive the Wuhan coronavirus vaccine or be terminated. We know how this has been playing out in the news. Nurses, police officers, first responders. Remember a year ago how everybody felt about them? Well, at least about the nurses. There were the haters about the police department who were already working. But these were our heroes. They worked through the danger. And now, cast them aside. On Tuesday last week, New York Supreme Court Judge Frank Nerveau temporarily blocked the mandate. That's a bit of good news. So this just tells you that the back and forth is going to go on. Our last line are the judges. This is the reason why who you elect as president matters, because they appoint judges. The ruling comes just one day after de Blasio issued a vaccination requirement for all private workers in New York and new rules for 5 to 11-year-olds entering restaurants or entertainment venues. De Blasio today announced major expansions to the Key to New York City program, the first-in-nation vaccination mandate for workers and customers at indoor dining, fitness and entertainment, and performance venues. That includes churches, by the way. Starting December 14th, the program will require children aged 5 to 11 to show proof of one vaccination dose for those venues. Now, this is a week-old information now. It was last week that he did that. And I'm going to move on for sake of time. So, our freedoms. I thought it might be good to just run through some of the Bill of Rights, not all 10 of them. You recall that when the Constitution was being put to the 13 colonies, the 13 colonies says, okay, but first, here are 10 rights that you're going to plug into this before we'll sign off on it. We call them the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to that original Constitution. Amendment number 1, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or promoting the free exercise thereof. Well, that's pretty simple. I would think any lawyer, judge, or average citizen could understand that. They cannot prohibit, it's baked into the Constitution, they can't prohibit the free exercise of religion, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And yet, they baked it into the law. You can't sue the government. You can't sue Big Pharma over this vaccine. That violates that amendment if I read it right. Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary. And this is what the founders said and the 13 colonies said. This is necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed unless you get afraid. No. Shall not be infringed unless you just don't like it. No. Shall not be infringed. America is kind of a unique country still because of all the guns that are out there. I don't know how it would come down if China invades or Russia invades or whoever, but you know they're thinking about that. That's in their mind. Amendment 3. No soldier shall in time of peace be quarantined in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. In other words, they can't make you take in their soldiers, even in time of war, unless they pass the law. They have to pass a law that says they can do that. Amendment number 4. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. The latest violation, and there are several of this, but the latest has been going on the last 10 years or so, is judges are now issuing warrants that say anything on that property, you can go find what you want to find. Because we think there might be something going on. Now, today, I have the constitutional right to be secure in my stuff, in my file cabinet at home, in my phone. I have the right to be secure in my stuff unless they have a probable cause. They have a reason to think I'm dealing in child pornography or I'm in terrorism. There has to be a real reason for them to do that. And yet, when you go to come back in this country, they can take your phone and so password protected. They can't make you give up your password because of this amendment. But if you have a thumb password, they can make you put your thumb on that. A judge ruled on that. They can make you put your, or in my case, I have face recognition. They can hold it up to my face and open it up. And they've got all my stuff. That's a violation unless they have a reason to believe. Just coming back into the country is not a reason. Our rights are being stolen from us. Amendment number 4. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury. Now, so I'm not going to go further with this. We can read the whole thing. But I mentioned to you last week the January 6th violators that are in jail right now. They've never been charged. They've never come before a judge. And their rights have been taken away.
Someone said today that they're undergoing some very severe treatment from the people.
The stories we're
The
hearing.
racist, but yeah.
Words coming out from the jailers that are
Yes,
telling how they're
yes,
being
yeah,
treated.
that's what I-
And they're not able to see that they're lawyers. I mean, this is unbelievable that this is taking place in America. Let's call it an insurrection. Let's say it was what it was. Let's say they were trying to take over the country. They have the right to due process.
Right, and
Let's charge them, put them before a jury, see the evidence, and do whatever it falls.
some are just pleading guilty. A man and a woman pleaded guilty this week just to get it.
Just to get it over with.
process.
Wow. So, this is what I ended up with last week, and we'll end up here again talking about the response that we need to make. Shall we take up arms and really overthrow the government? If you get it organized, I'll think about joining up, but I don't think that's the answer. Because in the end, the Antichrist is going to win. I'm almost in the end.
Yeah.
Almost in the end. For the next 7 years at least, he's going to win. You're not going to stop the Great Reset. Those things are coming. In the end, we know ultimately God is going to win. So Mary heard those words about what her son's birth was going to mean. Had been very troubling, and yet she continued to respond in faith. And Daniel, we talked about Daniel. He had courage based on his faith. Followers of Christ are not defined by demanding our freedoms. That's not what we're all about. We have these constitutional rights, and we ought to fight for them, but not to the death. Legally, through the courts, etc. But our taking up our cross and serving is what defines us as believers. So the rise of the surveillance state that we've been looking at, and the fall of our freedoms, because that is what the Bible tells us to watch for as the tribulation system rises. That's what's coming. So our mission has not changed. The opportunities are going to rise and fall. They have for 2,000 years. Some people who you know, who I can't say, who live in a place that's rather dangerous. If you can't figure out who that is, I'll tell you after we get done. They've been talking to some people that are of a certain nationality that have decided to follow Christ. And they have a huge opportunity to follow up on that. And they're doing that. So we need to pray for them in that. But so should we pray for ourselves. It's not over yet. You know, one of the reasons why the Chiefs never made it to the Super Bowl was because up until they went to the Super Bowl, they never really played 4 full innings. You've got to play 4 full innings to get to the end of that game. You can be ahead at halftime. You got to play all the way to the end, and they didn't do that. As church, we need to do that as well. So we'll close with this in Matthew 9:36. But when Jesus saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion on them, because they fainted and were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. Then saith he unto the disciples, The harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he will send forth laborers into his harvest. That's where we are. That's what Jesus left us with. Things have not changed. Our mission has not changed. The opportunities are going to come and go. We need to seize them as they come. Fact is, we need to look for them, or we'll miss them. You suppose the disciples saw the masses differently than Jesus did? The disciples probably saw a bunch of rabble-rousers, a bunch of no-goods, a bunch of... You know, nothing has caused my faith in humanity to plummet like commuting from Grandview to the church every day and back. When I see humanity, it makes me weep. But not the way Jesus did. And I need to weep the way Jesus does. People who need to be saved. Well, so we will end it there.